was just playing along with a backing track I found online, a symmetrical diminished, the half tone, whole tone scale, half whole scale, the diminished scale. I call it the diminished scale, but we mostly use it over dominant chords. In this video, I'll talk about how we use this half whole scale over dominant chords. I have a way of thinking about this that I think makes it easier to find, because the notes, it can be tricky. There's a lot of notes and a lot of extensions to think about. So I have developed this system which works for me. And I could have made a video where I go like, I didn't know how to play the diminished scale until I did this, or unlock the secrets of the diminished scale, or the pros think like this, or something like that. Not gonna do that, but I'll show you how I think about the diminished scale. So let's get started, shall we? Let's consider a G7. We're gonna use it over a dominant chord. So let's take a G7. That's a G7. The first extension we hit is the flat 9. Now I can't really play that chord like that. So what we tend to do as guitar players is to drop 2, the drop 2 voicing. So the second note from the top, I drop it an octave lower. I get this chord. So the way to check that you're doing drop 2 correct is to play the bottom note as a harmonic. This is a much more user-friendly guitar voicing. So over G. This is probably the first diminished chord you learned. So it's important to keep in mind playing a diminished chord over a bass note, which creates a dominant flat 9. It could be other bass notes, right? It could be B flat or E. Because of the symmetrical nature of the scale, but we're gonna think of it over a G7. So what do we have? We have a third, we have a fifth, we have a flat 7, and we have a flat 9. That's the chord, not the bass note. This is very important to understand how I think about this. I think about this. So those are 4 notes. The symmetrical diminished scale, or the half whole, or the whole half, has 8 notes. That means that there are 4 remaining notes. And those are also a diminished chord, a whole step above. So this is the sound that creates the chord. It's the dominant. If you think about a C major, for example, if you play the Bob scale or the Barry Harris 6 diminished, we have a chord tone, a passing note, chord tone, passing note, chord tone, passing note, chord tone, passing note. The diminished chord are the combined passing notes, and the other notes are the tonic. So tonic, passing note, tonic. The G is actually part of the other sound, right? A little bit confusing, but bear with me. So what are the remaining notes? Well, it's the whole step above any of those notes. I could play that on the piano and play both diminished chords at the same time and create what's called a double diminished chord. Can't really do that on guitar. I'll try to do it with my freeze. Yeah, you can't really hear it. It's not super relevant. It's better to use one extension at a time. So I'm not really going to talk about chords in this video, wasn't what I was planning on, but let's just take a few chords. If we have this diminished, it's very common to do this, right? So now I have the whole step above the 5th, which is the 13. It's also common to do this. Sharp 9, a whole step above the flat 9. Remember, the flat 9 is the chord tone in my mind, not the G. You probably play this, right? You could play the C sharp or D flat over the whole step over the B. It's not as common. And the bottom one is a little bit backwards, so it's better to put that note on top. This voicing, for example. Remember, everything can be moved. Or I see people play this even. You could do a lot more with this. You could use 2 extensions, but we're not gonna talk too much about voicings in this video. Just remember that the extensions are the sharp 11, the 13, the root. So it's backwards, the root is an extension, but just bear with me. And the sharp 9. If I play those notes, I could start on any of those chord tones. Let's start on the 3rd of G7. Then I play a whole step above that note. Then I play the next chord tone, which is the 5th, a whole step above it. Next chord tone is a flat 7, a whole step above that. Next chord tone is A flat, and a whole step above that, and so on. Over a G. So 3, whole step above, 5th, whole step above, flat 7, whole step above, flat 9, whole step above. So it's a chord tone, passing note, chord tone, passing note, chord tone, passing note, chord tone. Some of you are thinking, well, what? You're just playing the scale. I want you to think about it like what I just did. Not the scale. It's a sound. Chord tones and extensions. Chord tones, extensions. Not whole step, half step, whole step. Last time I talked about this in a video briefly. Somebody was very confused in the comment section and said, well, I thought the dominant symmetrical diminished scale should start with a half step. Yes, but now you're not listening. We're not starting from the root, but if you are starting from the root, it's half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. It's one of those things, it's easy to understand the idea of it, the concept. It's a half step and whole step, but and then you can learn fingerings, but it's very difficult to use this sound, this scale. I've noticed from many different reasons, it's hard to kind of hear it. And it's also hard to find fingerings. You get lost in, like, is it a half step? It's a lot of extensions, a lot of, wait, what is this? And then you get confused. And all you can do is play that scale or a lick. Maybe you learn a lick. And all you can do is play that lick as a finger shape. But with what I'm saying, you always know what note you're on in relation to the chord. If you're on the 3rd, the flat 7, or if you are on an extension of those notes. I should also mention that this is best like as if we're treating a diminished kind of sound. If we're playing over a situation like where that's the sound, we're staying on a dominant, or a dominant that's going to major. When the dominant is going to minor, this scale doesn't work that well. It can sound super hip, but you have that major 3rd from the key in the scale. But it can also sound kind of just wrong and kind of weak. But if you know what you're doing and you use it with taste, you can make it sound really hip, even in a minor tonality. But I'm basically talking about just the chord in it of itself, like as if we're playing over a G7. Because now what you can do with this chord tone, passing tone, chord tone, passing tone, you could reverse it. So I'm aiming for the chord tone from a passing note. Passing note to F, passing note to A flat, passing note or whole step above the third, whole step above the fifth, whole step above the flat seven, and so on. That's a very common jazz lick, almost a little bit too common. It's what we could call a cliche. You could also reverse the order. Remember that anything in the diminished scale can be moved in any interval you find in the diminished scale. What I want you to be able to do is to kind of open up the fretboard and the scale to a larger, kind of bigger picture. All I did was instead of playing, I did. Sorry, there it is. Because otherwise, you're just maybe the risk is that you're just learning a finger pattern. Here, I'm thinking about the chord tones. You could also do that chromatically. Very Michael Brecker-y. Or another very common lick is to go like this, right? Also almost too common. So you're probably thinking, if I can play a chord tone and then a whole step above, that means I could do any other interval from the scale as the passing note, if you know what I mean. Yes. If I go up to the next interval, which is a minor third, I'm not really doing much. But if I reverse it, it sounds pretty cool. Sounds like a classical or something Yngwie Malmsteen would play. It's a cool phrase, but we're not really using the whole scale. We're just playing a broken arpeggio pattern, kind of. So the other interval should be a note from the other diminished chord. Remember, there are two diminished chords in the scale. It's the tonic, not the tonic, but the chord tone diminished chord, and then the extension diminished chord. So I want to use the other note from the other kind of diminished chord. So if I go up a fourth, so chord tone, up a fourth, chord tone, up a fourth. That's a very cool sound. Of course, you could reverse the order of play. Or maybe. Already we kind of entered more modern tonality. If you wanted to give it a kind of a Schofield flavor, you can approach from chromatically below with slides. So I'm thinking about that note. Fifth, flat 7. So this is something you could do as a kind of cadenza at the end of a tune. Imagine you're playing, I don't know, everybody stops, and you are supposed to play this cadenza, you could use this. How do I find these notes? Well, I'm thinking chord tone of the D, right? It's the fifth, and then I'm just adding a fourth. So that'd be a little bit too much, maybe. If you do it like that, you have to kind of use a little bit more taste. I'm just showing you the idea. You could use larger intervals too. Let's go back to the G. So maybe the tritone actually is another of the same diminished chord, but I like that sound. Also sounds like Yngwie Malmsteen. So you could use larger intervals, maybe a minor 6, chord tone, A flat, right? And also use the chromaticism, Schofield sounding. Or it could be a major 7. Chord tone extension, chord tone extension. It's a simplification to say that this is what Schofield is doing. There's much more to his playing than that, but I often hear him use the symmetrical sound in that kind of way. By the way, a lot of this stuff is coming from this book. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second. Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns by Nicholas Slonimsky is kind of like a holy grail of jazz musicians. Right, so there's so much you could do with this scale because of the symmetrical nature. We're just scratching the surface, but let's talk about triads. I could build a triad from each of those notes. So from B, I could play maybe an E triad. Build a triad from the D, from the F. What I also like to do is to take, because that's a little bit too much, but you could take any of those two triads and tritone away from each other and use them as triad pairs. So E and B flat, or the G and D flat. But I don't want to digress too much because it's not a lesson about triad pairings, but you could do a lot with triad pairings here as well. Now, I want to talk about this a little bit more. This kind of stuff I'm going to talk about now, it's not necessarily, how should I put it, practical. It's more a way of understanding the fretboard and harmony better and open up the scale, open up the sound so that you're not just in this scale. What we want to do is we want to take this arpeggio, the diminished chord, and we want to spread it out. So instead of minor thirds, remember the inversion of a minor third is a major 6. So instead of playing it like this, we're going to play it like this. right? So this is the same notes, but instead of stacking them as thirds, I'm stacking them as sixths, major sixths. You get a huge intervallic shape, meaning I can do all the stuff I just did with that as my template instead of going like that. It would be like this. A whole step above each note, one of those notes. Is this a relevant lick? Not really. It just helps me to kind of think see the scale or the sound as a bigger kind of picture. By the way, all this stuff is on my Patreon page. So now I'm gonna kind of do some stuff straight from this book. Is to take Triad, for example. We're gonna start on G now. So G, a G major triad, go up a whole step, to E, up a whole step, D flat or C sharp, up a whole step, back. You can do this fifths. So fifth, up whole step, fifth, up whole step. It's not really something I would use. If there would be a place, it would be maybe like a tune like Naima, where it goes to. There maybe I could use something like that because of as a kind of celebration of John Coltrane. He was like looking into this kind of stuff. But what are some other tunes where there's a diminished sound? This tune. Invitation, right? There is a little bit of opportunity to kind of stretch the diminished sound, but all those types of phrases where you do that stuff, it's very difficult to make it sound musical, and it's more of as a kind of, you go through a book like that to kind of expand your thinking about harmony and music and to better understand and see that whatever you play down here, you can play up here, you can see the bigger kind of shapes than just a scale. That's the goal, to open up the scale. So I'll leave you with a few more licks. Here is a kind of a more traditional sounding diminished lick that I like. You go chromatically. It's like a gypsy jazz sounding lick. Or it could go up. If I start on the third. Simple but very effective. Or something I learned from Pat LaBarbera, who was my kind of mentor in college. Imagine taking the two triads. This is a lick he showed me, one of my favorite licks. So maybe G and D flat. So those are tritone apart. G, G, D flat, G, D flat. But then I play the flat 9 of each of those triads. Flat 9 of the D flat, G, flat 9. Then I go chromatically like this, so it's almost like a bob scale. If you do it with triplets, it's even cooler. So that could work over a G13 flat 9, right? Could also be the B flat and the E, because they can be, those triads are also in that scale. So those were some ideas on how to think about the diminished scale, the dominant diminished scale, like the half whole scale. Hope you enjoyed that, and I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.